All right. Sorry, excuse me. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Jen Morris. I'm the founder of Ship Happens. It's a content platform creation, a content platform for supply chain and logistics. And I try and make things as clear and understandable as possible for people that maybe don't work in the industry or are new to the industry or are just looking to understand the industry better. Today, we're going to be talking about 3PLs and 4PLs and giving people a better understanding of what those are, how they work, and whether you need one or the other or both. I'm going to be joined by Emma Newman from Wayfinder, and we'll get to her in just a minute. But first, we'd like to we'd like to thank our sponsors for this event. Excuse me. So our premium sponsor is lateshipment.com, and they are the first post-purchase platform that helps e-commerce brands track deliveries, manage returns, and recover shipping funds, turning the after-sale experience into loyalty and savings. The chances that you're losing money on every shipment without realizing it is common. Lateshipment.com automatically audits your shipments for carrier failures, duplicate charges, and billing errors, and handles all the claims for you. Brands typically recover 2 to 5% of their total shipping spend completely hands-off. If you're working with 3PLs or 4PLs, this is money you didn't know you were owed. Check out lateshipment.com to find out what you've been missing. Thank you, lateshipment.com. Next, we have OneLink Holding, an end-to-end supply chain partner that helps e-commerce brands source quality check products from China and Vietnam. They are home to chinasourcing.com and vietnamsourcing.com. Thank you, OneLink Holdings. And finally, Ecom North is a global e-commerce collective built by founders for founders. They know what gets you excited, real connections, fresh D2C strategies, and shared stories that leave you feeling inspired and ready to conquer the online world. In 2026, you can join them at their summits in Singapore, Los Angeles, Toronto, and Melbourne. Thank you, Ecommerce North. Now, thank you also to the sponsors for today's giveaways. Lateshipment.com will be giving away an Amazon gift card and a 3-month trial. That's very exciting. Sounds like a great one, to be honest. OneLink Holdings is actually offering 3 supply chain audits, which is valued at $1,000 to $2,000, which is incredible. And Ecom North is actually giving everybody that's on the call 50% off their brand pass to Singapore Summit 2026. So, that being said, let's start this presentation and let's talk to Emma. Emma, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name's Emma Newman and I'm the APAC Partnerships Manager based out of Hong Kong. I've been in Hong Kong for 7 years now and I've had quite a colourful background. I was in a highly regulated industry back in the UK, which is where I'm from initially, working as their sales manager in a pharmaceutical company. And then Hong Kong come calling. I, as I say, moved over here 2018, then got into the high tech space. And I then got poached over to a 4PL, another 4PL, and then started working at Wayfinder around about 2 years ago now. So I'm your go-to for all things 4PL and anything related to 4PL. And so yeah, thanks Jen.
Oh, that's great. You probably have a lot of knowledge that I do not have. I do not come from the tech world. I actually worked for 20 years at a trucking brokerage, and now I've been slowly expanding my knowledge into other areas, including maritime and e-commerce. So that's why I'm here. So now on to the reason that we're all here, to better understand 3PLs and 4PLs. And listen, there is no judgment zone here. So if you have a question, whether you think it's not appropriate or like not smart, please drop it in the comments. No question is a bad question. And we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we possibly can at the end of the presentation. So listen, there's so many reasons to have a 3PL or a 4PL or both, depending on the situation, depending on where your business is at. And so we're not here to convince you that one is better than the other or what is happening. We're trying to help you find the path to thing that works best for you. I personally have seen firsthand what happens when a company potentially tries a 4PL or a 3PL or some other combination of the two when they're not ready for it. So let's go through some of the questions that we've discussed and some of the things that maybe I don't understand as well as I should. And Emma can kind of help me with that.
I'm Bordy, the AI here, not the founder of Wayfinder.
Oh, surprise. We have Bordy here. That's fun. That was not planned, everybody. So Emma, for Bordy and everyone else, can you just, in the plainest terms possible, describe what a 3PL is and compare it to what a 4PL is?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so quite simply, a 3PL is the one that runs one piece of your logistics. They're the ones handling the goods, handling the parcels, handling the parcels at the warehouse, the ones moving them to the carrier. It's the ones that are built to do one job well.
Sure thing. A 3PL is the warehouse.
The fourth party logistics provider, that's the layer that really runs your logistics across multiple markets, multiple points of entry, multiple destinations with one team, one point of accountability, with one view of everything. So essentially the way that we like to describe it is we are the operating system behind your brand, running your logistics.
That's very clear and very helpful. When a brand is kind of trying to figure out whether they need a 3PL, a 4PL, or both, depending on what they're dealing with, how do they realize, like, what are the signs that they know they need a change? Is there things that they should be looking out for, like, and what do those things look like?
Yeah, so quite interestingly, brands will find that at one point things aren't working out. They've scaled into one other market than their initial market that they've started out at. They've got multiple systems that they're running. They're logging into different systems with different passwords, and it starts to get very tricky, especially for growing brands that just want to focus on growing their brand, concentrating on the sexy front end stuff. And they're doing fantastically well. They're scaling, brilliant. But it's then when you're starting to lose control and not really understand of what's going on at each of those different partners that you are working with and are servicing you, that's when it really starts to get a bit tricky, and they realize that there must be a better way of doing this. Like, what else do we need to do to try and make a change? I mean, there's nothing worse than going into work and thinking, okay, what am I doing today? Where am I logging in? Who am I speaking to? What am I doing? What issues are coming up? That's when it starts to sift through the KPIs aren't being met. And that's what is then the trigger point to be like, I need to sort this out. I need to figure out, and there must be a better way of doing it. So,
it's almost like
an inflection point, definitely.
It's almost like you're sitting at work and things are wrong and you're like, but I don't know why they're wrong. What's wrong? Mm-hmm. I need somebody to help me figure out what's wrong. That's really helpful. When they kind of get to that point where they're like, okay, like there's something wrong, I can't really put my finger on what it is or what the problem is. Like, we have all these sales, like things should be rainbows and unicorns, but they're not. So how do they, like, is there a way that they can, like a format or a chart that they can look at that helps them like figure out what like bucket or area they should be in?
Jen, do you want to just bring up the matrix that we have? There's two tools that I want to show everyone on the call as to what they can reference. So first, if you want to just show the matrix, there's a framework that we've built to discuss with brands as to what
this one or the next one?
Sorry, the next one. I'll talk about that sort of in tandem as well. But if you just go up to the next one, exactly. So where are you and where you're heading? This is a visual tool to show you about where you sit and where you should be if you're talking to a 3PL versus 4PL. So if you have a look down at the y-axis, this is where you see the number of markets and regions that you're operating from. It's okay if you've got a respectable but not quite heavy on the order side. You might just be starting out and you're shipping around about 500 orders a month. That's great. You go to a 3PL, they do a really good job at navigating you through those earlier stage. But when it starts to get very tricky is when I was saying the complexity starts to build up. Your order is increasing, you're going up from 500 to 1,000 to 5,000, 10,000 plus. But also not just that, as I say, you've got more markets you're now working with, and the complexity becomes too hard to manage internally for yourselves. And if you're a young stage brand versus an old stage brand, like there is a difference between the resource that you have internally. I would say that if you're very resource lean, it becomes very tricky very quickly. Mm-hmm. So there's no one size fits all, but hopefully this framework is giving you a bit of a feel for, okay, I'm at this stage, I'm shipping to one market, I've got under 500 orders, I'm going to go straight to a 3PL in the US, say for example, or my main market is Australia, I'm going to go straight to Australia, fine, great. But if you are managing multiple points of entry across APAC, across Asia, and you're shipping rest of the world from APAC, but also then want to set up locally in one of your main markets, say the US or Australia, that's when it can start to get more interesting with a 4PL. So as I said, hopefully this is giving you a bit of a guide for where you are now and where you are looking to head.
So you mentioned something that I want to kind of touch on. You mentioned multiple points of origin, but maybe one destination. So in that scenario, say you're shipping from multiple different countries into, say, the US, for example, would you say that, like, in those scenarios, a 4PL would be more helpful than just a 3PL, or is there more than just that thought process?
Well, I would say that if you are shipping multiple market and you want to set up in those respected home markets, that's when a 4PL would come. But if you're managing multiple points of entry just to one market, probably still a 3PL would be okay. If you're managing the forward inside yourself, because that can be quite transactional, and it's you're not going to be inbound into a warehouse frequently. Really, the main work and bulk of work is happening in this scenario in, say, your market that you're operating from, so the US.
Got you. Okay, that's great. Let's switch gears a little bit here. When we're talking about a 4PL, like, what do you think that a lot of people get wrong about what a 4PL does? Like, maybe they kind of understand, but they still don't grasp it entirely. Because I feel like that was me maybe 3 or 4 years ago, which is silly to admit. I should know more, but I wasn't touching e-commerce back then. And now that I do, I have a better understanding. But I think that there was a few things that I definitely had wrong when I first learned about a 4PL. So what is the things that people usually get wrong about a 4PL?
So there's quite often this misperception, a conception of basically it creates a middle layer, and that you're giving up a bit of control, and there's a layer between you and the operator. But that's actually not, in fact, the opposite is the case. We aren't there passively managing the 3PL, we're orchestrating that entire logistics program behind your entire movement of your goods. So that's designing the program, selecting the right partners in the respected markets that you're operating from and regions. You're working with multiple carriers per region. We're the ones selecting those. We're the ones that are selecting the warehouses based on the client's profile and the brand's needs. We're the ones that are supporting those brands. We're essentially acting as like an extension of their team, as we like to describe it. So 4PL should be acting as your team, should be acting as one of you guys. And especially, as I say, those brands that are starting to scale, that need that additional support to facilitate all of the movement of their goods, that's when it really becomes very interesting. And but as I say, like it's not a middle layer, it's the engine behind your logistics.
So it's kind of like when I don't know if anybody here has planned a wedding before, but So it's kind of like if you hire a wedding planner almost, like where you get to make all the decisions and have the control, but the wedding planner is kind of helping you organize all of those things together to make one awesome thing. That's awesome.
That's
I love that.
a great analogy. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a very simple way of describing it. You don't go out to all of these multiple vendors and I mean, you can do if you've got a small wedding, but if you end up having over 100 people that come in and maybe you've got some difficult family members or whatever, then it becomes tricky because you don't have to have all of that stress, do you? Just outsource it and then ensure that they're there supporting you, especially one of the most important days of your life potentially.
Well, and that goes to show too, like, let's be honest, a lot of us do work in logistics here, and who doesn't have a couple of problem children vendors or carriers or both that they deal with, that in reality, if you have somebody else to help you deal with them, maybe it runs a little bit smoother. So, and kind of along that line, when companies are kind of working through all of this, when is it kind of to the point where it's almost too late, where they're taking a risk by not making an adjustment to their plan? I think, like, I've seen it before too, where, like, especially when business owners are really close to their business and they have a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, all business owners have skin in the game, but some are a little bit more attached to their brand and their product. And I do find in those scenarios, sometimes them letting out control potentially causes additional issues. Do you find that this is something that 3PLs and 4PLs probably deal with when they're dealing with brands from time to time?
Yeah, I think that brands do like to keep control. They feel like if they're outsourcing it, it's going to become an issue. They know their brand. They don't want to have any of their brand policies or their brand, what their brand's about. They don't want that to be hindered. But it's important that you're as a brand, like, you want to be focusing on the brand, right? Unfortunately, for those that just by default you have to have the logistics behind it. But I have dealt with multiple brands that do find it difficult to give up the control, and then have not, when they get to the point of, this is in the case where they've had their own warehouse and have decided, okay, we now need to outsource it without growing that warehouse. Like, but let's just leave it to the guys that do it good, do it well, and have not really had that visibility and understanding about the types of questions that they need to be asking their partners. And it's so critical that when you're going through this evaluation with all of the partners that you're assessing, that you run through. In fact, actually, Jen, on that point, maybe what you could do, could you just share the checklist that we have, and I can go through that on the screen.
This one here?
Not that one. Sorry, not that one yet. Just the other one.
I don't know if I have the other one. This one.
Okay, so
there it is.
What I would say is that when you're having these conversations across multiple solution providers, and it's only worthwhile that you're doing your homework, it's only healthy that you're speaking to as many as possible, have in your mind what your non-negotiable checklist is. So whether or not that's, can they handle special goods? Are you a company that has DG? Can they handle DG related products? Have they got the storage facility to be able to handle that? Because even when it comes to DG in some regions, you need to have certain licenses to be able to ship. Are they an apparel type supplier? Can they support you with apparel? Because with apparel, it's high SKU count. Do they have the the space allocated to be able to operate as efficiently as possible? You might have some SLAs on your end with your customers. You need to make sure that also lines up to your brand promises. So, for example, what's the expected fulfillment time, and what are the cutoff times for the operations based on your the warehouse operations? What does that look like? And then discussing really in detail about the last mile carrier. How long is expected to take to get to your customer? And you may or may not know, but many different cultures and markets have different perceptions of how quickly they want their goods to arrive at the door. The US, for example, is very impatient. They want to have their goods delivered very quickly. But some brands find it really fantastic, and there's an expectation actually if they're doing it cross-border from APAC over to their relative home market that they're shipping to. But it's so critical that you're running through these, and you can use this as well. Like, we put this together as a non-negotiable checklist, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will fit your brand. But it's important to have this to discuss with each provider, just to see if your non-negotiables versus negotiables are matching up, and understanding what the roadmap looks like. So where is it that they're going within the next 12 to 18 months? Because believe me, not every provider will satisfy 100% of your requirements. It's impossible, really. But do they fit that 80? I will say, like, the 80-20 rule is a really good way to position it. What are those, what do they need to satisfy 80%, and then the 20% could be coming later. So it's always good to get them to request what it is that they're heading towards in the near future. And you might see that actually this would work for us, and as a partner to work with us for the longer term. So definitely use this as a checklist to discuss with your provider.
This is a great checklist, honestly. There's some stuff on there that I wouldn't have thought about. So it is really interesting to see. And it is good for you that you pointed out, like, these might not be your specific, somebody's specific non-negotiables. These are suggested non-negotiables. And that in some cases, some companies or brands would have other non-negotiables specifically around their type of brand, their type of product, and things like that, I'm sure. And speaking of that, is there any type of brand or type of good sees the best value from switching to a 4PL, other than like the volume and multiple markets? But are there specific brand types, whether it's CPG or direct to consumer or whatever that looks like? Are there certain types of brands and companies that can benefit from a 4PL more than others?
Do you mean like category of product?
Yeah, category, product, or like, for example, DTC versus like going through like a wholesaler or retailer.
Or something. So actually, on that point, why don't you also bring up the threshold moment? It will just give you a very clear view about what. Here we go. This one. So 4PL and versus 3PL. So 3PL will fit when, I mentioned before, you're in one market, you're in one region, very simple operations. But down the bottom there, few SKUs, simple goods, no highly regulated products. Starting off D2C, this is naturally what the progression of what in my experience, I've worked with. So brands that will start off shipping directly to the consumer, go into a 3PL, but it gets more tricky when they start scaling and they start having orders come through from their retailers that they've been speaking to, and they've got some agreements in place to then start shipping B2B to replenish stock at retail stores. If there's a distributor model, for example, that's when it can start to become more complex. So hopefully this table gives you a good view for when a 3PL should fit you in terms of those different variables. And actually down the bottom, what you can see is we always give it like a 10-minute test. So internally, if anyone within the company can give you an answer to any question regarding your logistics very quickly, then that's also when a 3PL will fit. But that's when you can start to understand internally, okay, it's starting to get a bit tricky now. We've got multiple bills coming in from multiple different providers. And let's be honest, like logistics, there's no standard, there's no global standard. And that's one thing that really struck me actually when I came from that highly regulated industry up in pharmaceuticals, as I was saying before at the beginning, to then come over to logistics where there's no standard globally about the way that logistics runs. That's when it can become quite tricky. And if you've got multiple solutions providers, they might be priced in the same line item, like a pick pack, but they're all doing it slightly differently. So no 3PL is the same. 4PL will facilitate that, like sort of pick through the weeds to give
kind
you
of help.
Yeah,
help
exactly.
Standardize things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To say, like, to present it in a meaningful fashion.
Yeah. And listen, with this day and age, what we're dealing with, like, chaos is the new normal. Especially in logistics, things are always becoming more complicated than they used to be. I have friends that work in compliance, and I bless their souls. I wish that they were. I hope they're all okay. So let's talk about pricing, like, because this is something I don't really know anything about. I really don't know how 4PL, I know how a 3PL prices typically, but a 4PL, like, walk me through, like, what a 4PL pricing looks like. Is it kind of standardized, or is it different for each company depending on what they're doing? What does that look like? Percentage, flat rate, what are we talking about?
So most of the models of 4PL are usually a cost plus, but bear in mind that we have preferential rates with the suppliers behind the scene. So what we find is we can often receive wholesale rates from our partners, who are essentially like another sales channel for them, right? So I would say that although we get asked, and sometimes there's the assumption that it can be quite expensive, the reality is actually we've got some brands that are just doing this with just with a single market, and have found that they can get it cheaper via us than if they went direct. So you would see it as a very standard, like in terms of breakdown, like the regular storage costs, the regular pick pack costs, the last mile costs, and but usually with preferential rating, depending on the brand and the say like the size.
Yes. Well, Emma's frozen for a moment, so I'll talk for a few minutes until she pops back in. Oh, there you go. You're frozen for a moment. We're good. We're good now.
I hope it was on a good facial expression.
It's always the worst facial expression when that happens. So you do work for Wayfinder, so let's talk about Wayfinder for a quick minute. If somebody was going to be working with Wayfinder or any 4PL, like if they were transitioning to a 4PL, but we'll use Wayfinder as an example since that's where you work. What would they expect the first bit to look like? How does the transition from working with just a 3PL to adding a 4PL into the mix? What does that look like?
Yes, so interestingly, as I was saying, we've got the checklist. We always go through a checklist of what the brand would need to have as like a non-negotiable. We're then working with them on our multiple partners behind the scene to decide, okay, so this is where your warehouse will be positioned. We also gather like data. We always ask for 3 months of historic data so we can really give them an audit on what we suggest in terms of like, okay, your concentration of customers, say it's the Australia or US, like those large areas. We would then say, right, this is where the warehouse would be placed. It's going to be over on the West Coast or the East Coast, or if it's Australia, be it Sydney or whatever. We then have an in-depth deep dive to develop the SOPs for our brands so that they and us understand what is it exactly how we should be operating for their particular products. And that's the unique proposition as well, is the fact that if you're with a 4PL, it's usually just a copy paste to each new market that we open up. So beyond like the first two, you can then look beyond that, and we've used the initial SOP development with the deep dive transition period to then place you and sort of essentially drop your stock into a new region where you then start to operate specifically from there.
Right.
Yeah, that's generally, so it's a matter of onboarding. From like 45 days to 90 days versus.
Well, that point that you made about like that it's a repeatable process. So like it's kind of like a one-time like one-time onboarding, and then when you move into, if the brand moves into another market, you can kind of just replicate, I'm sure with some adjustment, into the new market. This is one of the things that I kind of harp on a lot when it comes to logistics and things like that, is that repeatable processes, like that is logistics in most cases. It is a repeatable process over and over and over again. There are outliers and there are fires that come up, totally, but regular repeatable business should be able to be repeated in another market. I think that of course, like we discussed, there are some complexities with new markets, but the base should be able to be repeatable. And that's kind of a really nice thing to hear, that you guys kind of, like you said, do the copy and paste method so that it's not so complicated.
Yeah, and this is why I'm saying it's really important for you to have those discussions very early on with any provider that you're speaking to, whether that's a direct 3PL and they're operating domestically in the UK or Europe, wherever it might be, that you're having those discussions to understand, okay, so yes, the market that we're in now, we want to have to be closer to customer, like that model, and we want to set up in the UK. What can they give us beyond that when we start to grow and they might see some traction to go out to Europe? Do they have a facility over in Europe? That's where, as a brand and the direction you're heading, you need to have those conversations very early on so that you can see what it looks like for the next 12, 18 months, 2 years or so, and get that visibility on it.
Well, and that brings me to a question that I was thinking of earlier. What are, like, with a 4PL, like, are there limitations? And I'm assuming it kind of varies from 4PL to 4PL, but like, what kind of limitations would you foresee? So like, obviously, like, no solution is going to carry a company through the eternity, obviously, but companies do want to know that, like, a partner is going to be around for a significant period of time through some growth periods. So I guess my question is like, what are the limitations that companies should be and brands should be aware of that 4PL do have?
I would say that this is where I was talking around about sort of the markets and the regions and the sheer scope of what they have now currently, and where you see yourself going in the near future. If they don't have that availability, like they might not be servicing South America, but you see that in your roadmap and you need to have a partner that works in South America or Africa, if you've got those types of markets. So if that's the case for your brand, although I suspect not many on the call will have that, but there might be some limitations in the coverage, but there's no issue with you describing that to your 4PL, whoever you're talking to see if they have that in their view, in their roadmap. And I keep going back to that roadmap thing because it is really quite key to discuss very early on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think one of the things that I tell a lot of the clients that I've worked with in the past is, when you're going to be looking for another partner, whatever that partner looks like, it could be a pallet vendor, it could be packaging, it could be a 4PL, 3PL, whatever it is, you need to be aligned in the directions that your company and their company are going. Like, if they're growing and you're growing at the same speed, then that's pretty helpful as well, because then, like, for example, if somebody's a packaging provider, but they can only provide you 1,000 cases a week, then if you go to 2,000 cases in the next year, like, what are you going to do? So I do find that is such an interesting conversation that a lot of companies don't think to have, like, to be like, but where is your company going as well? Like, this is where we're going, but we need to know where you're going as well, so that we can decide on whether that makes sense for my business. I think that's a really good tip.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like, 4PL is logistics, and you mentioned about packaging, but we do have brands that request that we're sourcing packaging for them. And I'm sure there'll be the other case for other 4PLs. Like, we're concentrating on the logistics side, not the external side that can't really create any value for brands. So yeah, I think there tends to be a ceiling more so with 3PL, because there's only 4 walls there, right? There's only a certain number of carriers, physical asset, that can supply and support you longer term. bonded versus non-bonded warehouse. If you have multiple entry points, like that's where it can become, yeah, as I say, a bit of a ceiling if you need to discuss that and want to optimize your supply chain sort of closer to origin.
Right. So sorry, just wanted to we're getting close to time, so I want to get to this last question because I think it is probably one that people would be concerned about. If somebody is working with a 4PL and say the roadmap discussion did not happen prior and they get to a point where they have hit a ceiling with that 4PL, what does that look like? Does that mean that they have to go and start from scratch? Do they have to go find a completely different 4PL? Can you run 2 4PLs at the same time? What is the solution in that situation, I guess, is the question that I would have.
So do you mean in terms of like contractual arrangements, or like what does it look like in terms
more
of
like more like if, say, for example, they're working with a 4PL and they've reached a spot where actually, yeah, I am expanding into South America, but that 4PL doesn't have that capability. So what could a client or a brand do in that situation? Does it look like, oh, we need to start over with a new 4PL, or is it a situation of like you're running 2 4PLs? Is that a possibility? I don't even know if that's possible.
Yeah.
What is the potential solution there?
I think it really depends on the brand and where you're heading, and having those is always so critical to manage any client relationship the way that you should do, which is being as close to them as possible. So just understanding around what the volumes look like, the operational overhead to set up a new region comes at a cost. So it's always worth discussing with your existing 4PL to know this is where you're heading. We're expecting to have 500 orders in the new market. What can you do? That's the first question you should be asking, because to go out to source for new providers, it just doesn't really make any sense. So if you've already got an integrated relationship with your 4PL, have those discussions with the existing one. But it's then when you start to talk to multiple, if you're already with a 3PL initially and then they can't support you any further, then you're essentially going out to market to find another 3PL. That's when it starts to get resource heavy, and the operation
get messy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so if I was to kind of wrap all of this up into a nice little bow, which is not logistics friendly, but we're going to try. So you've told me before that there's 3 big questions that we kind of need to lean on. Where is your logistics working well, and where is it not? Which markets are you prioritizing next? And what would logistics off your plate mean for your team? Those are the 3 questions we've kind of discussed before we did this call. We've talked about that. Are there any other questions that, like, if a company's maybe like kind of tinkering with the idea of 4PL, obviously those 3 questions are quite important. But are there any other little questions they should be asking themselves before taking the time and energy to go and research 4PL relationships?
Look at the contract. Ask yourselves, what does it look like if I start with this provider? What does it look like to wind down if eventually you are starting to think about, say you've started 3PL, you're starting out as a brand, what is it that you need to consider to terminate early? So it's those kinds of nuances that you want to go into. Sometimes, and we're all guilty of it, you might just sign a contract not realizing really what that actually means for you. But I would be asking myself, okay, so now I've grown it, I need to open up a new market, a new region. I want to get closer to customer. I've had feedback from my customer base that if I could just adjust the lead time of the deliveries by 2 days, and therefore I want to set up closer to customer, you want to start getting that rolling out pretty quickly, then I'd be asking yourself, okay, if we cancel the contract early, move to another provider, how does it work? What does it do? But the other thing you also want to be speaking to them about and asking them is, how do they handle it when something goes wrong? How do they manage the KPIs? Who do I need to call? All of those types of questions you would just see that you want to just prioritize to prevent measures in place that, yeah, so preventative measures, and the framework around that.
Okay, I think that's really good. I think we've kind of touched on a lot of things here. I want to open it up and see if anybody has any questions in the meantime. Oh, we have a question right away. That was really fast. Question from Tom. How do you see the role of 4PL landscape evolving over the next 5 years? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, that is interesting. So I see it only growing from here on in. I think that there's a lot of brands out there that come to the realization that due to all of the tools and the technologies now and the rise of the middle classes, that there is so much untapped consumerism, and knowing that they need that support early on, I can only see it rising over the next 5 years. I know that is the case from APAC, and we've seen a rise in the middle class over in APAC, and so brands are finding creative ways to still remain competitive. So Western brands looking to target more APAC market is one of the things I've been seeing a lot more of. And even in terms of, so actually just back on that, so targeting like Japan and South Korea, we're having lots of conversations about that and supporting some brands to target those markets because they're not sure how to do it. That's from a Western brand standpoint. Yeah, I was going to say something, I can't remember, but yeah.
I think as well, we'll see things like with all the turmoil with the administration in the US. I think that we are seeing a lot of brands, especially like kind of not maybe moving away from the US, but exploring other potential options, moving to try and do the EU or maybe Australia, like similar potential markets. And I also think too, it is a lot easier, not easy, but less difficult to start a brand these days as a small one-person business. I've seen it with quite a few people where they're able to build a brand, build a website, and find their own products to import. And so if small brands like that start scaling up, I think that there will be a big place for 4PLs, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, according to our research, actually, it's due to grow by 12% by 2034. So yeah, Tommy, huge. It's only increasing from now on. Yeah, and we're starting to see leap. Exactly. We're starting to see more traction with certain types of categories, with like the supplements, and that can be quite a tricky category from a regulatory perspective. But and so to be able to navigate those markets and all of the requirements to export supplements, and if they've got shelf life conversation, it just, as I say, like the sentiment here is it's only growing. Brands are only finding more creative ways to remain competitive, and so I'm in a good space, which is good.
You're like, I'm going to be fine. AI is not coming for your job.
Exactly.
Okay, do we have, before I switch over to potentially doing our giveaways, do we have any other questions at all? Hopefully, Tom, we answered your question pretty well. We can see what's going to happen. We are, again, want to remind everyone, we are close to the end, so we're going to wrap up. I think I have one other question. This is coming from somebody I know who couldn't make the call because they're in North America and it's like 4 a.m. there. She runs a small business, but she has been having, so she does maybe about 400 to 500 shipments a month in North America. But she started to gain, through social media, she started to gain some traction in the EU. But she doesn't know what that volume would look like. She doesn't know if the interest is just social media interest or if it's actually buying signal interest. So I guess her question that she sent me was, what should she be looking for as a way to know that that market is really something she should go for? And if she does do that, should she talk to a 4PL before engaging a second 3PL in the EU?
Yeah, I would say that start having those conversations now. For if I guess the first question is, are they happy with the current 3PL they are? And there are many great 3PLs out there. Say they do a really good job at providing a service. So that would be the first question I'd be asking. If not, there's another conversation to be had. But if they're happy, then start having those conversations locally with some local 3PLs if they're not quite there yet with that 500 orders per month to the market. So 500 orders to the EU in this case. Start having as many conversations now. It's only healthy, and understand the minimums. So quite often brands get stuck at the minimum side, and quite often enough, solution providers will have a minimum because they need to build on efficiencies on their end, whether that's on a volume basis, so number of parcels they're expecting you to ship each month, or if it's on an average spend basis. Have those conversations. Quite often 3PLs or 4PLs, whoever you're talking to, will have a flexibility to give you some leeway and bandwidth just to get yourself up to that expected 500 parcels a month. But they're the types of questions that I'd be asking any provider into, in this case in the EU, and just to see, because there might be some, there are definitely in Asia some 3PLs that are happy to take on, in that case, be very early stage brand for that region.
Right. Okay, well, I think that's all the time we have for questions. If anybody does have questions, you can always kind of bring them to us and we can try and answer them separately through email or chat. From what I do understand, Emma, you guys have an event that's coming up. I probably won't be there because I'm here in Europe, but I've heard that you guys are doing something.
We are indeed. Joel, do we have a slide on that at all? If not, I can just talk about it.
Yeah, you can talk about it and I'll try to bring it up right now.
Cool. Yes, so for any brands on the call, we're running an event in September and we're trying to curate for around about 30 founder-led brands for a 3-day trip in Vietnam. And this would be a really hands-on experience for brands looking to meet with as many different factories as possible. We've got some different sessions over one day as well. And then, run by our 2 founders, so Nick and Chris there, as you can see on the screen. But this is a real unique opportunity that if you're thinking about producing in Vietnam, you're currently producing in China, or you're already producing in Vietnam and China, perhaps some of you on the call have thought about the China Plus One strategy to diversify your supply chain and origin. We're running this event for founders. It would be a real intimate affair, 30 founders, and running between 5th and 6th of September, I think, is it, Joel? So yeah, I'd be interested to hear.
From the 5th to the 8th.
5th to the 8th, brilliant. So interested to hear. If anyone wants some more information, we can send those details out after the webinar. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. I wish I could be there, but a little far for me to go. That being said, we're at the time where we're going to do the giveaways. I think Joel is going to pick the. I think he's going to pick the names or spin a wheel or something like that. So Joel, take it away.
All right, give me 1 second. And all right, can I get a drum roll? And these are the winners. from our sponsors today. So congratulations to Paul, Jordan, and Lydia. You three are the winners for the One Link Holdings supply chain audit valued at $2,000. I will send you an email with the details, but you can also send a screenshot. And this is the main contact over at One Link Holdings. And then for the $100 Amazon gift card, this is a global Amazon gift card, applies in your country. Lynette as the winner, and a 3-month trial for late shipment. The contact is Rahul. I think Rahul's on the call today for late shipment. So congratulations to Lynette. I will send all 4 of you an email after this with the details. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, and we have a couple of last minute questions that popped in here. So, and we have 5 minutes, so let's see if we can get to 1 or 2 of these. Hazam asks, how can I convince my 3PL to use our internal logistics and warehouse operation module? What are the challenges of integrating multi 3PLs through API connections? That's all you, Emma. I barely know what that means. A lot of
okay, I just want to just for a bit. Can I go to my 3PL 2010? I'm not sure what side you're coming at from this, but I think it really depends on the technology, doesn't it? And whether or not they have, because what I should say is that many 3PLs will have an outsourced technology that they use and they white label. So it's whether or not you can convince your warehouse to convince their technology provider to build on that. And that's where it comes a bit tricky. And the other thing that perhaps I didn't delve on in so much detail is the technology layer that comes with a 4PL. With a 4PL, it's very flexible and agnostic and agile. So I'd be asking other questions here about whether or not there was alternatives in terms of the technology layer, and absolutely, like, is it open API and what does that look like from a dashboard perspective? Yeah, but it might be a bit trickier for 3PL because they might already have a technology that's not an IP of their own. 4PLs will typically have their own dashboard and IT department. And so as long as there's a business case to be able to build on those additional integrations, then that's the flexibility of the model.
Okay, and I think we have time. Hopefully that helps Hazem. I do understand that I was joking a little bit. I do understand what an API is, just for everybody. But we have one last question from Joyce. Beyond volume and number of markets, what are the qualitative factors in an e-commerce brand that signal they are ready to move to a 4PL? That's actually a really great question because we did really focus in on volume and number of markets. Are there other qualitative factors that a brand can kind of look towards?
Honestly, I think you need to be understanding culturally of what they're about as well, and understanding what types of people are working there at 3PL before you are thinking, okay, are they really on my team? Are they really partnering with us? Do they see the same vision that we have as a brand as we start to scale? If they don't, that is a key signal for you to be like, okay, I need the flexibility here. I need a partner that can help me move beyond wherever it is that you're at that point. 4PL seems like a great fit because that's where we come in from an agnostic, flexible model. And yes, it's actually the people is really, really quite a critical factor. Hopefully that's answered your question, Joyce. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Joyce. All right, well, I think that this has been a great chat. I learned a lot. I hope everybody else learned a lot. I would like to thank our sponsors again, lateshipment.com, One Link Holdings, and Ecom North. Again, don't forget to use your 50% off the brand pass for the Singapore Summit in 2026, which is Wave 50. And if people have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Emma on LinkedIn, or you can contact Wayfinder and they will help you. Oh, that's great.
Thank
And
you.
just one thing, we'll be sending everybody an email tomorrow with a recording and with the slides and a summary of the event, etc.
Great.
Okay. Great. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thanks for joining. Hope you learned a lot.